In this lesson, we take a closer look at the emotional, mental, and behavioral elements of conflict. Our capacity to remember and retrieve our memory is also considered. First, emotions. If we look at the word emotion, we can say that it stands for energy in motion. What that tells us is that emotions are about movement and that they relate to the quality of our energy. We feel things, we feel the energy of the moment. Sometimes it feels rewarding and sometimes threatening. We are drawn to pleasure and adverse to pain. But in the sensations and the awareness, the raw feeling of what is, we get the message. And we act on that message and move on. When we do that, there is no significant emotional energy that is left in our body. However, when we do not do that, the energy that is not integrated is held in our body as emotional baggage. And the reality is that we have all experienced painful events that we have struggled to feel fully. Most of us have a lot of unintegrated emotional energy, originating in our childhood and having been compounded through our adult years, that we still need to integrate. When we mediate, a lot of the participants will be unaware of how their unintegrated emotional energy is impacting on them in the very moment. They are unaware of how they are responding to their current adversary as if they were someone from an earlier time when the original wounding occurred. And yet, for the most part, they are unaware of this. They just continue to project their unresolved pain out into the world. The most helpful approach that I have found to addressing emotions in mediation comes from the field of Gestalt Therapy. What the Gestalt therapists say is that a human can change when we allow them to be. For example, if someone's angry and you tell them not to be angry, you're resisting their experience and not allowing them to be. This denial typically makes the angry person even angrier. On the other hand, if you allow that person who is angry to be angry, then there's some hope that they can change, because as long as we don't allow it and we resist, we set up an unfortunate pattern that keeps us stuck and us going around like in an eddy. When we allow them to have their emotion and in some appropriate way acknowledge it, they can move and change. So that's the first thing. Allow, don't resist, and acknowledge fully the truth of the emotional state for the person expressing pain. When we feel those unintegrated emotions, we can move on. Here's what Deepak Chopra says about it. Until you make peace with negative feelings, they will persist. The way to deal with negativity is to acknowledge it. Nothing more is needed. Feel the feeling, whether it is anger, fear, envy, aggression, or anything else, and say, I see you. You belong to me. This owning of our emotions can be truly liberating. Whether or not the participants will be able to step up to the plate and take responsibility for their emotional state is another thing. To the extent that they are willing, we should encourage them, but we may discover that they are not able to, and we may have to support them where they are. Remember, we always meet the participants where they are and guide them from there. The other piece of our definition that I wanted to put more attention on is our mental process and the way in which we think about the conflict. Thoughts. Not only are we perceiving interference, scarcity, and incompatibility, but there are a range of cognitive biases that are influencing how we are filtering the world. Our sense of scarcity arises from the fact that we are loss adverse. In other words, we feel pain more than we feel the potential of a gain. We run from pain and walk towards pleasure. As a result, when framed as a loss, we tend to be risk-taking, and when framed as a gain, we like a sure thing. These biases will be influencing participants in a mediation. For example, the defense will often want to take the risk of trial, and the plaintiff will often want the sure thing that is being offered and placed on the table. Our perception that we are being interfered with arises from our focus on fairness. It seems that all humans are constantly monitoring for fairness. Not only that, but we give ourselves the benefit of the doubt and hold others to a higher standard. This is referred to as fundamental attribution error. So when things go wrong for us, it's the environment that we hold causally accountable. When things go wrong for someone else, it's their character that caused it. Conversely, when we are successful, we attribute that to our character and our abilities. And when others are successful, we attribute that to the environment. At the level of thoughts, what we will be challenged by is participants that are fixated on their sense of being right. Ultimately, the goal is to help the participants to move beyond a right-wrong framework, to open up to the possibility that they can have different perceptions and recollections of what happened. And these different perceptions should not get in the way of them working something out. This brings me to memory. The reality is, we all remember things our way. So the participants will come with their respective recollections of what happened that support the conclusions they came to. When their recollections collide, they can ignore it or explore it. If they do explore it, they may discover that either both or one had made an unfounded assumption, and after verifying certain things, accept the other's version of what happened. But often, after exploring it, they will still have different versions of what happened. In a sense, they are arm wrestling memory, which is really tragic given the human frailty when it comes to memory. We struggle to remember accurately without any intention to be deceitful. Who hasn't been stumped by their memory at some time or another? We help the participants see that they can still reach a resolution even if they do not resolve this particular factual dispute. They can agree to disagree. This is liberating, but it should be noted, will always weaken the quality of the resolution. Behavior. When we are addressing the behavior, we have missed opportunities to address and engage around the emotions and also thought processes, and so nip the conflict in the bud. That said, the reality is that people are often going to come to you when the conflict is manifesting at a behavioral level. There are essentially 5 different behaviors that we observe in conflict. Thomas and Kilman refer to them as styles, and Alexander Hayem to them as strategies. In a sense, they are both styles and strategies. One model asks these 2 questions. How important is the relationship? How important is the outcome? The other model asks, how assertive do I need to be? And how cooperative do I need to be? The 5 different behaviors, styles, or strategies are avoiding, accommodating, competing, compromising, and collaborating. Let's take a look at each in turn. Avoiding. When we don't value the relationship and we don't value the outcome, it makes sense to avoid and not be assertive. We don't have a dog in the fight, and we don't care about the person with whom we are fighting. So in those circumstances, I don't need to cooperate, and it does make sense to avoid. The reality is, however, that a lot of times people avoid for the wrong reasons. In other words, they avoid, but they do care about the person, and something significant is at stake. Fear is often the emotion that will get us to avoid for the wrong reasons. Accommodating. There are times when we value the relationship but not the outcome. This is a very common feature of ongoing relationships. There will be some aspects of the relationship that will not be too important to us. We really don't care whether the clips are plastic coated or stainless steel. In those circumstances where we don't care about the outcome but do want to maintain a strong relationship, then we cooperate without being overly assertive, and accommodation would be an appropriate behavior. Again, we have to be careful that we don't accommodate for the wrong reasons, namely fear. And there's also another danger with accommodation. It often becomes the norm in a relationship. We become like a doormat. We start to resent it, and eventually we go ballistic. We move to a zone where we say, now I do care about the outcome, and I don't really care about what it's going to take relationally. This arena, despite the harsh way I characterized it, is in fact what we are mostly socialized to do. When I do face-to-face trainings, I will ask participants to name games that are not competitive. It almost always stumps them. If I ask them to name games that are competitive, there's no limit. So the reality is that we do socialize ourselves to be competitive. In fact, when we examine our deeply held beliefs about the world, we discover that most of us are of the view that the world is fundamentally competitive. It's dog eat dog. It's a jungle. We have to defend to take care of ourselves. While there is truth to this, there's also the reality, while there is a lot of competition taking place, there's also a lot of cooperation and collaboration. We tend to discount that, and the danger is that when we do discount that, we will be presented with ambiguous life situations where we will assume that it is competitive and we will miss an opportunity for cooperation or collaboration. So competition makes sense when we value the outcome but not the relationship. We assert our needs strongly and are less concerned about cooperation. Collaborating. How about situations when we value both the outcome and the relationship? When that applies, the theory says it makes sense to collaborate. Jan defines collaborate, collaborating, collaboration, and collaborative as working together or jointly. Parties are working together when they merge their resources to reach a common goal that satisfies their respective needs or interests. To collaborate requires the highest skill level. It also takes the longest time. However, when we do it well, it offers the possibility of a win-win or integrated solution. We are both assertive and cooperative. Compromise. A little shy of collaboration is compromise. I like to think of compromise as a subset of collaboration. It's that point at which we realize that we don't have unlimited resources or time is running out and we choose to split the difference. Or we just can't find a way to expand the pie or find that elusive solution. The problem I often see is that people aim for compromise and so don't ever explore the possibility of a win-win situation. And what about situations where it makes sense to collaborate, or at least that is how you assess things, and the person with whom you are engaging approaches things in a competitive manner? In those circumstances, the person approaching things competitively is likely to get the better deal. How do we protect ourselves in circumstances like these? When it makes sense to collaborate, we should collaborate. However, when the person with whom we are in conflict with responds competitively, we should then return the favor. In other words, respond competitively in kind. Not with the goal of escalating the conflict, but with an educational intention. In other words, we signal to the other that we are going to compete as they are, but that we keep the door to collaboration open at all times. We are forgiving, and we hope by responding with competition to competition, we both discover that it isn't helpful to either of us, and that we both quickly realize that the best way forward is to be collaborative. What is ultimately most important is that we choose an approach to our conflict consciously. As is apparent, each of the 5 different behaviors can make sense at different points in time. As a general rule, as already noted, we favor collaboration, and when we mediate, we encourage the participants to collaborate. That said, the reality is that a lot of the time, the participants will approach things competitively. We need to be able to facilitate and manage a mediation in which the participants are collaborating, but also be able to manage a situation where the participants are being competitive. There are 2 collaborative behaviors that are important for the success of the mediation process: negotiation and forgiveness. Negotiation takes place in the external world and attempts to be rational. Forgiveness is usually internal, although it may also have an external dimension. We explore both in more detail in the next lesson. As always, thanks for your attention.